now move to Ball State.
Dr. McCormick, members of the, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Members of the board, thank you for this opportunity to do a Hoosier Virtual Charter Review. With me today also is Amy Marsh from MGT of America to help me with the presentation. Also, because of the importance of this, I also have John Marski, the board president of Hoosier Academy, and also has come in Stuart Udell, the CEO of K-12, that will help me with part of the presentation as we go forward. What I wanted to start with, I know in your package that you have a consolidated and actionable plan for Hoosier Virtual Academy that was submitted. This is a plan that the Hoosier Academy and K-12 worked with MGT. It's not the Ball State plan. As Dr. Ernest likes to ask me to lean in a few times, we leaned in, but it's not a Ball State plan. It's the Hoosier Academy plan that we worked together. It's an important thing. What the essence of the plan was, as I brought together information prior to, you saw that Hoosier Academy had 8 kind of different plans. They had plans for advanced ed, they had plans under school improvement, they had plans for the authorizer, etc. And as Dr. Ernest and I talked, there was many things that were similar, but we tried to get them focused. And so what the attempt was to kind of come up with one plan that the school could put together, focus on, and accomplish without trying to do 8 things or saying tomato, and having differences in that. It also helps with looking at, leading and lagging indicators. You may look at the plan and say, well, what about X? So there was lots of discussions about what are the most important things to accomplish, and hopefully by accomplishing those, they would accomplish some other lagging indicators as you go forward in any good plan. So what we tried to do was to work with the school to put together something that they could put together and then put into action as they go forward over the next school year. To remind you that we gave them a 2-year extension last year. They're going to be judged on the 16-17 ISTEP data that they're finishing up, we don't have yet, and that technically this plan will go forward and look at really what happens in the 17-18 school year. I recognize that, but Dr. Ernest and his staff have put together some of these activities and tried to accomplish things like looking at participation rate. They had a kind of a high one. They were in the 80s, but they really did a really strong job of looking at participation rate and trying to get all the students to take the test. They also looked at things like their cohort group and how many kids are in the cohort, and if they're no longer in the school, to remove that. So we kind of looked at their report card and saw areas that they could kind of get that low-lying fruit and try to accomplish. This is kind of a broader, bigger plan that, if I can at this time turn it over to Amy Marsh to talk about the 5 areas of the plan that talk about the instructional mapping, which is a really important thing to the standards, observation and feedback and professional development. You know that Dr. Sandy Cole was here working with the professional development, trying to get not just professional development for the overall school, but for that individual teacher as they look at how they're teaching, what their school or their students' grades are, and aligning that. The career and college readiness, which is kind of a new component she'll talk about. You heard a little bit about from our students, the community, family, and student engagement. If a student's falling behind, what resources are there to help that student accomplish those goals, and how you help the family, which is really important in online learning. And then at the end, she'll also talk about staffing and budget, but that's where the other 2 presenters, John and Stuart, will help me talk about what Ball State plans to do around staffing and budget. So Amy, oh, there you are. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob. Yep. Good morning, members of the board. I'm going to invite to join me Dominique Franklin, who's on the leadership team at Hoosier Academies also. She can answer a lot of detailed questions. As Bob mentioned, MGT worked in cooperation with Hoosier Academies, with the board at Hoosier Academies, with Ball State, and with K-12 to come up with this consolidated plan, because we were talking about some pretty dense plans that existed prior to this. Bob kind of gave you the overview of those 5 chapters. Within each of those chapters, there are very specific actionable items. Many of those actionable items have already been mobilized in advance of the 2017-18 school year. So anticipating this big need, and Dominique can speak to some of those things. I want to draw your attention to a couple of areas within the plan. The first is on page 4. We have a really, I think, numeric student profile in addition to the profiles that Rachel shared with you earlier today. And this profile illustrates the mobility that you see among Hoosier students. I think that this is also reflected in Dr. Keller's review of Hoosier that the Department of Education, in collaboration with state board staff, did over the course of the past couple of weeks. You'll see that mobility of the students at Hoosier reflected in both places. As Bob mentioned, there are college and career ready metrics embedded in this plan, as well as actionable items. We have said to this point that college and career readiness has been offered, but deliberate efforts have not been made to ensure that students are enrolled in courses appropriate to them, whether they be AP, dual credit, or industry certifications. And then on the tail end of that, taking those assessments that are the corresponding assessments with AP and industry certifications, it's been kind of left on the table. And so deliberate action needs to be taken in that space in particular. And I think Hoosier Academies, again, has already rolled up their sleeves in that space to ensure that students are taking those AP assessments this month. I want to draw your attention to the data pages, which are the final pages of the plan. Numbers 3 and 4 are engagement, around engagement. I think Hoosier, the inclusion of engagement in this plan really puts Hoosier in front of legislation that was just considered this past session around this engagement piece. And so I think Hoosier is out ahead in considering internal policies around student engagement as well as parent engagement. Dr. Keller's notes from the visit also indicate that ISTEP participation rates are far higher than those indicated in this plan, so we'd like to lean on those higher numbers, which means that Hoosier will have to reconsider some of their goals around participation, because if their baseline is higher than we expected, certainly we want to continue to increase participation in ISTEP. Finally, I just want to point to another activity or specific action item that's happening at Hoosier, and that is around the growth of leadership. They've made deliberate efforts to enable teachers to be the leaders within the building, and they the leadership team has put in place an entire program that really engages teachers and allows Hoosier to continue to grow their own leaders. So as I indicated, a lot of these action steps are already well underway, and Dominique can answer any specific questions that you may have about those actions.
Amy, when did MGT come on board?
December
Of
2016.
And on your action items in the plan, how were those decided? How did you identify them?
Generally, I would say collectively, we looked at where big problem areas existed based on the data and what needed to be done to correct those. So it would be, a problem solution kind of thought process.
Okay, so help me through this one. So when I talk to researchers, there's not a tool available, there's nothing out there that helps to say, here are the areas, because of the unique environment, here are the areas that you need to target and focus upon in order to improve. And without that tool, with that being not existing today, but we've been at this for how many years and struggling, and no one got out ahead of it. Fast forward to today, how do you still, I mean, we're still under the same situation of, are we being deliberate based upon research and evidence, or are we just based upon anecdotal and qualitative information? I mean, how are we pulling those?
Pulling the data element?
No, just the items that you're targeting, how you're identifying those action items, yes.
It's very deliberately looking at data, at student success data, student engagement data. So if you look at this plan kind of backward, look at the data elements and the baseline pieces, and then there are action items within each of the chapters that reflect how we're going to get to the goal. So for example, I-STEP participation, there are action items that reflect how do we increase I-STEP participation, because that was one area that the data kind of led us to say, this is the problem area.
But is there research to support, even though the data is showing, you're looking at data, but what research is there to support, like if you do this, this will happen in your environment? Like we have a lot of that for brick and mortar, but in your environment, I've tried to call people and they're like, it's just not readily available. So my concern is, how are we coming to those conclusions?
I am going to lean on...
Other than just, I mean, I know we're looking at the data, everybody's looking at data.
Sure.
But how do we assume that's going to make it the shift that we need based on there's just nothing available? You come up.
Can I interject? We're not ready to kind of put this forward, but I'm working with Paul Garrison from Daleville. He got a grant to put together, they call it Evolve right now, and they're working with Brad Oliver, Dr. Brad Oliver at the summit, and my team's going to be looking at that instrument May 16th, and it has the 4 components, and it's focused exactly on virtual education. So I can't answer every question you have right now, but we're working with them right now, and Hoosier would be one of the schools they asked me to kind of go through that and measure that tool. They're going to put their online school through that, and so maybe at another board meeting when Dr. Oliver and us look at that instrument, we'd be better able to answer that question and say, Dr. McCormick, here's some other instruments to be used.
So can I push just a little bit here? I'm trying to, from the Ball State perspective, very well respected university. As the authorizer with a ton of responsibility, we're at the point of a lot of years down the road, and we're just now asking the question of what kind of tool is available and what's that look like? And I have a lot of concerns about that on so many different levels. So I'm just concerned about, boy, we'll really kick the can down the road to all of a sudden say, we probably need to look at some good options to see what it's going to take to improve.
Well, I think as we all do, just in chartering, that I've been there 8 years, we've learned a lot more about authorizing from the beginning of that time in 2002 to now. So, but I don't have a direct answer to say I have an instrument right now. 2 people in the state, Paul Garrison from Daleville, I think you probably know him well, and us are trying to work together on that instrument to bring it back and hopefully develop public policy about virtual education.
And did Ball State initiate that?
We're in partnership with them. We've had many meetings with them. No, they got the grant first. To give Dr. Garrison credit, he got the grant money first, but we're working with him.
Okay.
I don't have an answer for you right now. Okay.
You answered it.
All right.
Thank you.
Are you? Okay.
Marianne?
Yes, thank you. So first of all, I just want to thank the parents and everyone that has spoken today. I am certainly very deep in understanding that the online academy works for many families and many students. And so my questions today are not for where it's succeeding, it's my grave concerns for those that are not succeeding and the sheer number of students that are not succeeding. And so as I review Chapter 1 of your plan, I share some of the concerns that it seems like a lot of this is new, like there's been a lot of time to now, and so when I look under the action items, and I appreciate you saying, Amy, that some of these things have already started, but I'm concerned that it's taken so long for them to start. And again, with my concerns for students that are not succeeding being the forefront of my questioning today, I look at what you're calling to further refine a strong school multi-tiered student services tiers levels of support. I have a lot of interest in what does that mean, because I would say right now it's not very strong because we have so many students that are not succeeding. So could I hear more about that and what it has been and what do you intend to have happen differently moving forward?
Good afternoon. So this year we've implemented the MTSS process with we have an MTSS coordinator.
Is this the first year of this program?
Yes. We had RTI, the response to instruction, beforehand. So under the new MTSS process, we still identified students. We offered Tier 2 support and Tier 3 support as well. Our interventionists are in place. A couple of years ago, we did lose some federal dollars, which impacted our title support for our students. So this year, we had those dollars in place so that our students could have the interventionists as needed. One thing that we are adding to our MTSS process is the high ability piece as well, because our students that were high ability were not necessarily receiving the best services. So we do have a high ability coordinator that's working with students.
Could you share with me more in detail then how does the execution of that plan happen for the students that are suffering? I see the data, I see the assessments, I see all the pieces there, but I have concerns about the execution for these students that need something more, and I'm not sure how that's happening.
You're talking about the plan overall?
Yeah.
Or
well, no, more with the intervention piece for the kids that are not succeeding. You obviously know the data, you know who it is, you have a lot of information about what's happening to them, those that are transient. You have a lot of good data. Not arguing that at all. I'm just really concerned that the students that are struggling the most are not getting the interventions they need to make those improvements. And so what is the plan to address them? You can say professional development, and that's good, but in the end, what's going to happen for kids differently?
well, I think I would say that engagement. We have we have it there. The services are there. We need to get our students to those classes. I think that's where I think that's where the biggest challenge is. I think the system is in place for students, but we do need to get our students there so that we can give them the support that they need. I think the plan addresses engagement as we start working on tightening up on what does attendance look like, including the logging in addition to attending the live class connects. At one point we talked about flexibility. Our families love our school because we're flexible, but also in the end, if they have the opportunity to watch a recording and not necessarily attend live, that does kind of play into that as well. So I think we have to tighten up on or just firm up what that flexibility looks like as far as attendance. But I think that once we get students actually to attend and hold them accountable for doing so, then we can provide them the services that they need.
And I appreciate that, hearing what the students are required to do. What about the teacher side? Because to me, it's a partnership between the
Absolutely.
teachers and the students, and so the engagement's important for the students. But tell me what's going to happen different with the teachers once they have the students there.
Beyond the professional development and the coaching, the plan addresses the coaching. We have instructional coaches that will be meeting with our teachers. We have a new teacher evaluation system in process. We're moving to the TAP model. Over the years, we had a teacher evaluation, but it was not really consistent. So I think that the plan addresses that. A lot of professional development across all of our teacher leaders as well as the administrators on implementing an evaluation system that's going to work. Holding our teachers accountable for instruction and good best practices, and making sure that they are producing, that our students are learning, looking at the outcomes, looking at the assessments, that they are assessing students, doing formative assessments throughout their lessons. Also looking at the mastery exit tickets on a daily basis. So yes, so both the teachers as well as our students.
So again, I'm just trying to understand what's driving this in terms of scientifically based research, best practice. There really isn't a lot in the plan in terms of understanding why you're deciding to do what you're doing and how you'll know you're successful, other than hopefully more students doing well.
Well, I would say that the assessment, the common assessment, we know that that's research-based. If you have a common assessment and we're looking at that, that's something that we don't necessarily have in place. Right now, we're looking at 5-star for next year. Across the board, I'm the high school principal, so I can speak, clearly about that. Just at the high school level, not having an assessment that clearly tied to Indiana standards, so that I know exactly where our students are deficient or where they may, need that additional support. So I think once our teachers can really identify where the students are through that common assessment, then we can provide the supports that students need.
There was a part in Chapter 2 where you're talking about the observations and feedback in PD. How do you anticipate the peer observation improving what's happening for the teachers in terms of instruction? Is that through the coaching model, or can you speak to that a little bit more?
Yes, well, peer observation, we started that in January. We felt that our teachers, would enjoy seeing what the other practices are taking place in the classroom. So they have started, they provide feedback to their peers. They're picking up on best practices. They're seeing their peers implement new, collaborative working group, cooperative learning groups as they've received professional development on those strategies. So just giving them the opportunity to see other virtual teachers among themselves that share their best practices. Also, if a teacher, wants to turn to their evaluator or their instructional coach and ask, hey, do you have any recommendations on a teacher that I should observe? We definitely give them those recommendations. But we wanted it to be where we didn't want to force that, or, say you need to go see this particular teacher, so we gave them the choice to choose first. And then as we progress, so through next year, through the peer observation, our instructional coaches, the evaluators can start giving more suggestions. Hey, I think you should see this such and such. They're doing breakout rooms, they're doing cooperative learning groups in their classroom, or they have a good handle on formative assessments during the class.
It's somewhat of a bold statement, but it just feels like there isn't a sense of urgency that I would hope, and that looking at best practices is certainly one way to start, but it's not at a very deep level in terms of knowing what's going to work, and to focus your coaches around instruction that is going to make the difference. It just seems like a very low way to start, where maybe the bar should be a little bit higher. So I just feel like the rigor may not be there that I would be looking for.
Given that K-12 is not, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's not aligned to Indiana standards completely. So there's is K-12 here? Mm-hmm. So, and there's supplemental materials that students are given, is that correct? To help with that alignment to the Indiana standards?
Yes, our teachers do during the class connects.
Okay, so when we visited, I wasn't on that visit, but our team came back and said the alarming part was that students are not required to participate in the piece that is aligned to the Indiana standards. But yet we're measuring our students on the Indiana standards. And so talk to me about that, because a lot of what I'm hearing you're wanting to do with common assessments and things are assuming 100% alignment. But if you have a chunk of students who aren't required to sit through that piece of instruction, help me through that.
Right, that is definitely a challenge that we have had some discussions about. We do curriculum mapping. We have aligned the curriculum. We've spent some time doing that with our teachers and professional development, bringing them in. We do, because the curriculum is there, our teachers, they go into the curriculum and make sure that we are teaching the standards during our Class Connect sessions. So it is a challenge, but we do record the lessons, and I think if we tighten up on our attendance policies, on requiring those live Class Connect attendance, then those sessions, then our students will actually get that information, and also some professional development with K-12 on how to manipulate the system to make sure that we're able to change those assessments, alter the assessments, upload additional content so that students who may not be attending the live sessions, those students that are attending asynchronously, that they would still have access to those Indiana academic standards.
Thank you.
Did I just hear that within the platform that you currently operate, do you align with Indiana state standards or not?
Did you want to? So currently, it is aligned to, I'm going to say, the Common Core standards, but I will have, we do have Stuart from K-12 here that can speak to the curriculum itself. But what our teachers have provided is the K-12 curriculum, and we have our Indiana blueprint, the blueprint, the Indiana academic standards, and we do align the curriculum, well, do our curriculum maps according to those blueprints.
So the answer to that is no.
Correct. Yes.
I think that's what I said.
Please.
We could jump in on that. I'm Mary Gifford with K-12, and this is Stuart Udell, the CEO of K-12. So some of the work that MGT endeavored to start in December was looking very carefully at the state standards as well as the testing blueprints, and then the pacing. It's not just enough to teach it, it has to be taught before state testing. And so focused on some of the core tested areas starting in January, now rolling that out more broadly and making sure that we've identified any of those gaps, and then equipping teachers with third-party resources, teacher developed materials, teacher training to allow them to ensure that those content standards are taught, and then also looking at where the curriculum can be developed within the online school to also meet those standards. And it's going to be a combination of those things. And with respect to the engagement that the superintendent asked, this is a really important question. We are very happy to work with the legislature this year in changing the law for virtual schools and permitting a personalized plan for a student that would describe what's required for a learning experience for a student and allow the school to actually compel the student to participate, which is new. And that has been one of the frustrations across the country, and why there's some of that lack of good research is because the virtual schools cannot compel participation in those teacher-led sessions, which we think are so vitally important. Now Indiana is leading the country in passing a law that will permit the school to actually have some teeth and compel the students to participate in those sessions. So we're very excited to start developing policies with the Hoosier Board to actually implement that law.
So with that law, the teeth would be, if I am understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, so I know we have some lawyers and lots of lawyers in the room, if the students miss X amount of days, then there are consequences to that, correct? Which could be a withdrawal from the school. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, it could be.
Okay.
There would be a process of escalation along the way, identifying, you miss this much, we start bringing these additional supports, and you miss this, more supports come in, and a process of escalation,
Right.
which ultimately could be removal from the school.
So staying with that topic, when I look at 369 expulsions, and the reason I hear from a lot of them is because obviously you're very limited on why you would have that many expulsions given the nature of the format. Much of it was the truancy or the lack of participation. So that's already happening unless it was expulsion without due process, or were kids just automatically, were families signing off on due process when those 369 expulsions happened? I mean, there's so many pieces of it that, because the law now allows what was already happening. When you have, correct?
If I may, the law allowed for taking the traditional truancy statutes and regulations and trying to retrofit them around the virtual engagement model. The new law would allow that to be a little bit more flexible around that virtual engagement model, looking more at engagement, not just the definition of traditional truancy. And so, the truancy laws have been followed by the school. As you know, that is a rather long process, and it's really important to the school board that students not languishing, and that process is very meaningful, and that at the beginning of enrolling and at the beginning of the school year for a returning student, there's a discussion about what the instructional expectations are going to be during this year, and that there's buy-in from the family and the school, and that is diligently followed. That would be, in addition to truancy. Truancy is just not necessarily going to be the best thing to catch the students who are not engaged in a timely way, nor to set the appropriate stage defining what engagement needs to look like student by student in the learning setting.
So given that it tightens it up a bit, which is what you're after, so it tightens it up a bit, is that 369 going to get higher, or do you foresee that getting lower?
if I may, this is the first law of its kind. There are a couple of states, Wisconsin and Arizona, that have somewhat similar laws, but this is by far the best drafted law. I would expect that it will probably level off and potentially get better. And not necessarily just because of the law, but because of the requirement that the school is going to have on the front end of having that discussion about expectations and describing what the learning setting is going to look like student by student. I think additionally, as Dominique mentioned, there will be some short cycle data that is available that has not been available to the teachers. And so there's going to be actionable items to inform the development of those plans throughout the year as well, which will be a first for the school and definitely very needed.
And so, Bob, as an authorizer, are you comfortable with the expulsion numbers and the graduation rate numbers that are coming out of this model?
No.
That's all I needed to know.
No.
Thank you. BJ?
For the 2017-18 school year, will you be 100% aligned to Indiana standards?
Mr. Watts, instruction will be 100% aligned. The curriculum that's delivered through the online school is a portion of that instruction, and that will be very significantly aligned to the standards and to the testing blueprint. Anything that needs to be teacher developed or third party will fill any of those gaps, much like you would. There's probably not a traditional textbook that would cover 100% of it. The teachers are professionals. They will be trained and provided with resources to make sure that the instructional experience covers 100% of the standards and that the pacing is appropriate to prepare kids for the state test.
And that piece will no longer be, it will be required now, where they have to sit through the Indiana supplemental piece.
As required as the law will permit, absolutely. Yes.
As required as the law will permit.
Yeah. The school still has to develop a policy. The law is brand new, and so, yes, I think it's the intention to maximize what's in that law to compel the students to participate in the sessions that they truly need.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So state board or department, legal staff, what's the law say regarding alignment, schools in Indiana that have to be aligned or the requirement to be aligned with state standards?
It's the minimum.
I don't care who answers it, it's somebody that knows. Public schools, thank you. Tim, I had a public school service, public school alignment.
I apologize. Could you please repeat your question?
What does the law say about the requirement for public schools to be aligned with state standards? Curriculum.
I'm looking to the lawyers. It's my understanding it had to be aligned. That's what the state test is based on. That is what they get reviewed. That is where the accreditation piece comes in. It's never been a question in any of the places I've worked.
I mean, the simple answer is we have to be aligned to the standards, the Indiana standards. Our schools need to be aligned to the Indiana standards.
Okay, let's go back to the, I don't know what's up there. Don't know the names, but let's go back to within the platform that you currently use. Are you aligned with state standards? Yes or no? K-12.
Can you just repeat that, please? I didn't hear that.
Sure. Because I just added something to it.
Okay.
Within the platform that you currently use, are you currently aligned with Indiana state standards K through 12?
In our curriculum and instruction, we are aligned with Indiana state standards for K-12.
in the platform itself, the actual curriculum, we are largely aligned, and we're working towards more complete alignment. But what we've done in the interim, and what we'll do on a forward basis, is supplement some of that alignment with the work that we're doing at the school level, and also with other resources that we're going to bring to bear to plug in gaps effectively.
So when will that work be done?
It's in progress as we go into this coming school year. We will be largely there in total, but again, the actual courseware itself is not 100% aligned, but I would say we'll be largely aligned. Again, getting to full and comprehensive alignment with the other pieces that we bring to bear, which is certainly the way, it works in lots of schools, including brick and mortar schools.
And when did that effort start?
Throughout the course of this year.
Okay, so this year, calendar year?
I'd say since this calendar year, maybe going back to last fall.
So school year?
School year, let's call it, yes.
And the progression or the progress is, can you give me a percentage?
I can't pull an exact percentage, but again, I'm sorry?
Approximate?
It varies widely by grade level, by course, and it's not information I have at my fingertips,
Okay.
but, if we called it, 80% plus, and we fill gaps along the way, and that's not an average
So
necessarily.
did I hear you say 80%? 80 overall, 80%?
In some cases, significantly higher.
Some cases higher, some cases lower. But overall average might be 80%?
I don't know the overall average. I'm throwing that out as a proxy.
How would we get that? How would we find that information out?
We have work that we've done internally. We can dig that, certainly. But we've been working, comprehensively with the board, with the support of Ball State, with our teachers, again, to make sure that real time we're filling those gaps with other educational resources. And also, in this coming year, we'll be providing additional resources that we're going to plug in.
Is the school aware of which grade levels are 80%, which grade levels are 90, which grade levels are 70?
The school, the administration, the teachers have been involved through this process in doing a lot of the mapping, as we do in our product group as well, to try to figure out where there may be some gaps. And also which gaps are most important to fill and with which types of resources. So it's a collaborative effort.
Is K-12, I'm assuming you're aware of Indiana accountability, because I know it's different from state to state and you're nationwide.
Yes.
Knowing Indiana's accountability and knowing we're 5 years into this, really to say you're not confident on that alignment and not having made an effort to make that a requirement as part of the curriculum instruction and assessment, to me, you've just set up a bunch of teachers, you've set up a bunch of administrators and families to almost misguide and mislead them into they're working really hard and they are struggling to find success under the Indiana accountability. Now, success in other areas, absolutely, we can defend that all day long, and I'm the first one to say a letter grade doesn't tell it all, but that's Indiana right now. Our legislators have made it clear, it's one letter grade, and so that's the game we're playing. But when we are not even aligned to the standards that we're getting that accountability based upon, that is a real struggle. But as the operator, not to recognize that and say, we're 5 years down the road into, and numbers that are very concerning, and we're just now looking at it.
Well, I appreciate that concern. For starters, I've joined the organization about 14 or 15 months ago, so that does not absolve me of responsibility for prior. And organizationally, we certainly have that. I know from my experience in working with other organizations in the space that built curriculum, that have built assessment, that have provided instructional services in schools, and that have helped operate schools, that curriculum is very, very important. We are investing heavily in it. And while we've had this 5-year window in Indiana, there's been a lot of change nationally. Again, that doesn't absolve us of making better progress in Indiana, but we have other states we work with as well that have had 3 separate state exams in the last 3 years. There's a lot of change going on, so we have been working expeditiously, as we are here, to fill in gaps that there may be at the moment with additional resources. We're working with the teachers to do that and the administration to do it at Hoosier. We're working in our product development group to find resources to bring in, and we're bringing the kind of underlying core curriculum along at the same time. So I certainly can't stand here and tell you that we will have 100% alignment in our underlying core curriculum, but the goal with Dominique and the rest of the leadership team is to make sure that the teachers are well equipped to figure out how to bring resources to bear. We've talked about class connect sessions and getting better engagement from students in those live sessions. That's an opportunity for us to focus on power standards, where we have a real opportunity to bring kids along and perhaps in areas where we're a little under-resourced from a curriculum perspective right now.
Well, and
It's our internal synchronous learning environment. It's a Blackboard Connect plug-in. Sorry.
And I just want to say, you know, as a public school teacher in the state of Indiana, as we've gone through switching from Common Core to the Indiana Academic Standards, I don't have the luxury of saying there's been a lot of change and my grades are not my grades and I need more time, and I haven't been looking at my grade for the last couple of years. My grade is my grade, and I'm accountable for my grade. And every other public school teacher is accountable for their grade. And I understand you have, you know, responsibilities in other states, but...
Well, we believe we are accountable here as well.
But, you know, every teacher in the state of Indiana had to adapt.
Yes.
And so we're not giving everybody, you know, a pass. And so
Nor do we want, ours have adapted too. We have, I think you are correct in that, you know, we probably have not provided as much as quick support. We take responsibility for that.
But that's a little bit what bothers me, because if the teachers in my building said, well, I'm, you know, 60% there, I'll be there next year on the Indiana standards, that would be unacceptable in my building. I mean, it would just be absolutely unacceptable. I can imagine in BJ's building or Dr. Yeager's building, that would just, you know, if your teachers came to you and said, we're at 60% of teaching the standards.
Yeah, and again, we have lots of courses, lots of grade levels that are very highly aligned, and we have some that are, you know, that are gaps that need to be filled faster. On the assessment side, the other thing we're of course doing is moving from a norm referenced assessment that was not as clearly articulated to the Indiana standards as it should have been, to a tool that is more widely used in the state, which will allow us to analyze data gaps and provide you know, the opportunity for teachers to work in teams to identify both small group and personalized learning plans and fill those gaps with some of the resources we're bringing in. So from an assessment perspective, a big difference is a huge difference in the year ahead. And again, I agree with you, we probably should have been there already, is that we will be bringing much more actionable short-cycle data to bear into the hands of teachers. And that's something that has been very hard over the past few years to not have that. We also think from a leadership perspective, and you know, we're going back a couple plus years now, but we tried to go out and find the best leader we could in the state as a head of school, build a team around that person. And you know, we do believe we have an opportunity to make great progress this year. That from a funding perspective, we are pouring, and we will pour additional resources in on the forward comprehensive plan that we talked about. So, you know, directionally, I think we're talking about a little under $500,000 of incremental resources for staff, and we're working with Bob Mara and the Ball State team on that plan, and we're fully committed to fund up to all of that to make sure that we, you know, put the resources in place to make progress.
BJ, I know you had a comment, and Dr. Freitas, I'll get to you.
And I understand that we were just about this is pretty new for you as well, but I hope that you hear the sense of urgency here with, as our standards do evolve and change, that there's a commitment on your end that you are going to become very, very quickly and remain aligned with Indiana standards with all of your instruction.
Yes, that's our intention, to get there as quickly as possible.
Dr. Freitas?
I have questions for our authorizer. So could you step forward, please?
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
In what year did you authorize this school?
the virtual?
Yes.
Yeah, 11.
The school we're talking about today.
Yeah, 11.
What year?
2011.
2011.
first-
So we're about 6, 7 years
That
into
was,
this.
yeah, that was the first year they permitted to have
And what do you say your role is as our authorizer? You're representing us. What do you
Right,
think
so
your role
I
is?
have 3 areas of responsibility: academic performance, financial performance, and governance.
And we're learning today there's maybe an alignment problem potentially and other issues. Don't you see it's your responsibility to update this particular school along the way and be sure they're in compliance as we make changes?
So yes, I mean, that's part of the responsibility here. Talking about, if I can, with the alignment to the curriculum, we've had conversations with the board in their audit that they had, that we paid for, that they believe that in their EMO agreement, that they want to have put in there that the curriculum will align 100% with the Indiana standards. So that's one of those lessons, looking at what was done in the past with EMO agreements, which we have no authority to approve, right? That's something we make sure there's components, but we have worked with the board, or John Marsky's here that can talk about that, and that's been an issue that they want to put into that EMO agreement, and we work there. So that's an important issue that we work together with them.
Don't you see it's your responsibility on our behalf to monitor compliance with state statutes and board regulations and board guidance?
What this has done, and working with, Brad Oliver, this is one that we will do with all our charter schools and look at their curriculum alignment at that. Correct.
Well, why are you waiting 6 years to look at that issue?
Well, I think that what you're talking about, what was just said, that they went down a road of Common Core, right? And looking at then switching that, and now the piece that we did as authorizers, and we worked with NACST on this, never looked at going into the curriculum and mapping that. And so that's one of those things that I think as a good authorizer now, and sharing that with my colleagues, we think we need to do. But that, we had outcomes, not inputs. That would be more of an input. And now we're looking at inputs and outputs.
I see this discussion more as an assessment of you as the authorizer, frankly. You're representing us, you're getting paid over $400,000, I believe, $450,000 per year of taxpayer money. And what we're discovering today is some fairly significant things that should have been handled years ago have not. And so we're focusing in on a school, I think, that's helping parents, helping kids. And frankly, to be honest with you, I think the issue lies at your doorstep, not the schools. You're our liaison. You need to monitor what's going on. And if it's not happening, then it's at your doorstep. Unless you come forward and say you've asked the school to do these things, alignment and so forth and so on, and they just totally refused. And in our last several meetings, you've never mentioned that. And so my concern is with the authorizer. We're paying you nearly $500,000 per year. And now today we have students coming forward, parents coming forward, talking about the significance of this education. And I trust parents too, by the way. I see that on your shirt. I trust parents to make the right decision. I'm disappointed, I guess, in the authorizer, unless you can tell me something else. Quality education can occur in multiple mediums, not only in a public school. There's really terrific public schools. There's terrific private schools, terrific parochial schools, terrific home schools, terrific virtual schools. And because this is sort of out of the box a little, there's the potential for quality education here. But you're our agent to ensure that they've kept up with everything. And so if they're not aligned with Indiana standards, that's really something that you as our authorizer, getting paid to do this, is sort of fallen by the wayside. And some of these other issues are foundational issues that you should have been communicating to them and give them the opportunity to fix it. Not last minute that you suddenly decided they're not aligned and tell them to create a plan and they have a plan to come forward. So
I'm unwilling to, in a sense, punish the school in some way, punish kids, punish parents. I don't see it's their fault at all. I think it's really on you and Ball State for not monitoring what's been going on. So that's sort of the conclusion I'm at. So convince me otherwise. To give you a chance.
That's that's where you're at. I mean, our framework that we work with the National Association of Charter School Authorizers doesn't dive deep into that, but I'll just lead with that, with what you said as a learning experience, and maybe I can get on to where we want to go. I put together a team of folks that we want to bring in. Dr. Ginger Bollinger, which is the superintendent. We have Brian Carpenter, which is a governance person. We have also Gerald Cassidy from the university that's in assessment that will be helping me, along with Julie Woods she's the superintendent of the Burris and the Academy. She'll be on that team, and Jamie Garwood that will be evaluating. And also to talk about your money piece, we worked with the board and also K-12 that we are willing to kind of help fund the plan that they put into place. So we would take our resources and give them back to the schools, so that, to your point, what I'd like to see, along with the EMO agreement that mandates that they're 100% alignment, we would like to see that this alignment is done by the beginning of the 17-18 school year, and we're willing to put our money back to the school and give them those resources to make sure that happens between now and say July 1.
Question. Can I do a follow-up with them?
Yeah, and then I know Gordon wants a question of BJ, so we'll get to you.
In 2011, when you took this over, did you get paid by us to monitor and
Sure.
authorize?
Yes.
In 2012, did you get paid for this?
Yes, sir.
13, 14?
Yes, sir.
So
Yes,
you
sir.
received probably $2.5 million so far, maybe $3 million. You're coming before us with a plan. Why didn't you do this back in 2011, 2012, 2013?
Well, we did have plans, and we were working with the school improvement plan with the department in alignment, and also along with advanced ed to look at the school. This is a deep dive. This is really peeling back the onion. So to stand up here and say I didn't do anything, I'm not so sure I agree with that. But I will give you the fairness in saying I'm listening to you and I hear what you're saying, and Ball State's willing to work with the board and K-12 to ensure that this happens in the upcoming school year or by that time.
Just one follow-up comment, just to reach closure on this. I hope whatever action we take today does not penalize the school, does not penalize the parents, does not penalize the children of the school. I don't think they're the issue, frankly. I think our issue is with the authorizer. They represented us, and so if there's any consequences, I hope we direct our anger, so to speak, at them.
Can I ask the principal, I'm sorry, what was your first name?
Dominique?
Dominique, I'm sorry. I just have to ask this. I know your job is difficult and you're in another environment. You have a unique population. I understand that. As a principal of a building, I've been a principal. And so it was, if I knew I was presenting a curriculum and instruction that wasn't aligned to an assessment that our students were responsible for, has that concern been shared? Because to me, that's the ownership of the school. It's the ownership of the leadership to say we have got to align what we're doing in this building so kids have, we're asking the kids to do almost the impossible, to take an assessment that we have no idea the percentage of information they've been exposed to or taught or any of the above. And so, but that to me is a little bit on
It's huge.
leadership to say we are putting our kids in a horrible situation. We're putting our families in a horrible situation by knowing this is happening and not reacting to that. So I just want to give you time to defend that, because I know we're not the only ones in this room watching this. So if I'm the principal of that building, help me through that.
Absolutely, it is a concern, it has been expressed. Just a little background, this is not the first time that we've done curriculum mapping aligned to the standards. This has been something ongoing. I've been at the school for 4 years. My high school teachers, I'll speak to them. We have been mapping for the last few years. This year we did get a new curriculum for math and for English, so that, you know, it's a little bit, just within the curriculum itself, it's a little bit more challenging to manipulate, to move some of the material around and to change some of the assessments. So we've had more challenging time this year, and I know that K-12 development is working on making that easier for our teachers to do so. So to say that we've not been teaching standards, I would not say that. I would say that when you get the curriculum as is, it's not totally aligned, but we have done everything that we can to supplement, to make sure that we are mapping the curriculum, providing those maps for our students according to the standards, and to make sure that that's what we're teaching during those class connects.
So the piece you can control is, it would have been a required piece versus supplemental that they sit through the Indiana line materials.
Correct. We can control what we give, what we teach, like in a regular classroom during those live class connect sessions, we can control that. Our teachers can also upload material, additional supplemental resources to our platform as well.
Okay. Gordon?
I just wanted, this isn't for you, I just wanted to clarify a couple points that my colleague here said, gently correct, I think, a little bit the record. Ball State does not represent the state board. They are not our authorizer. We are in a position, and correct me if I'm wrong, lawyers, but we are in a position of monitoring the authorizer. We're not contractually giving them those funds. Those are funds, that's not coming from the State Board of Education. So there is a line of distinction, I think, David, between, so we're in a role of monitoring as opposed to kind of, they are not, the authorizer is not representing the board. They are an authorizer under state law. They authorized the charter school. They signed all the agreements. They are coming before us because of the multiple years of issues. Is that a correct interpretation?
Yes, it is, and I think maybe I misinterpreted, but I think Dr. Freitas was just talking about taxpayer money as far as the funding to the school. But
that was my point, that we're providing taxpayer money, state of Indiana money, to an organization to fulfill a role.
Yes, but Mr. Hendry, that's correct.
I just wanted to make sure, for those watching, this is not something that, it's coming back to us. It is coming to us as an oversight board based on the school's performance. And it's our responsibility under state law to address the concerns with the authorizer. So I just wanted to make sure that's clear, based on what you said, David. I have a few more questions, but I'm going to defer to BJ.
I'm good. No question.
Okay. Did you want someone to come up to the podium to?
Yeah, so we haven't, I don't believe I know that we have a report in our packet from the department and the on-the-ground kind of report that was conducted over the last few weeks. Is there someone from the department that can speak to that on-the-ground assessment?
Sure. Dr. Keller led our team. Dr. Keller is here. Would you like to come up, please? So the Department of Education, along with some state board staffers, actually conducted more of just an informational gathering for us to make sure that we were being fair and we were really taking a deep dive into what exactly was happening. And so I will leave that to Mr. Keller. Dr. Keller, we spent 2 days on site, so I will let you take it from there.
And we're state board staff. I just want to make sure state board staff was along on that, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Dr. McCormick, members of the board. This is our report from our review of the school. We began by looking at data that's publicly available on the Compass website, and then looked at that, compiled it, and then worked with Dr. Ernest to arrange a school visit, and we were there, as Dr. McCormick said, 2 days. So the first few slides tell the story, the data story. Again, these data are presented on Compass. The state's data site, they are presented in a slightly different way, but this shows the history of enrollment of the school. And this slide, which is also available to you, all these slides are available to you on the State Board of Education site. This just shows the pattern of enrollment by grade band, just to kind of give you a sense of the composition of the number of the enrollees at Hoosier Academy. This was briefly discussed earlier, but the number of unknowns in the grad cohort is of some concern, because nearly 25% on average are listed as unknown, and you can imagine the challenges that the school faces in knowing exactly where all the people in their cohort are. So this slide just demonstrates the graduation rate of the school in 15-16. That's the graduation rate when you adjust it for waivers. We're at 16%. This slide shows the retention of new students year by year, so you need to read this slide vertically. So 51 new students came to the school in 2009-10, and 2 of those students were remaining at the school in 2015-16. And then you can just kind of follow that trend out to the right. So in the 14-15 school year, 662 new students, 338 are retained in the following year. So this just gives, gives you a sense of the mobility challenge that the school faces. I did ask our data team to pull all the unique students that were reported on real-time data last year. So last year's numbers of 8 for ADM were something around 3,300, but the school actually served 5,170 students over the course of the year at one time or another, which represents about a 55% above actual ADM. So that's another, I think, important number to kind of look at. And if you count the 16 students that enrolled twice in the school because they left and came back, that number goes up to 5,186 students. So again, I think that's an important kind of contextual number to understand the flow of students through the school. As we turn to look at the achievement, the blue bars are the state average. The gray line is the number of students who have been served by the school for 2 full years. And the state average is the yellow line. The blue bars are all of the Hoosier students, Hoosier Academy. The question that we're trying to kind of get at in this slide is what impact does continuous attendance at the school have on achievement? And so we can say that the gray line, those students do outperform all students when taken together, although again, you can see there's a pretty consistent gap between the state average and even those students who attend on a continuous basis. Here's that prior slide was for English language arts. This one is for mathematics performance and tells a fairly similar story, although the gap appears to be widening. So to summarize, here are some numbers that were referenced earlier. Participation. Certainly participation goes into the accountability score, so we're trying to peel back the layers of what contributed to the current school grade. This would certainly be part of it. So growth is an enormous challenge, and participation, actually. Another question we were asking ourselves is, who comes to Hoosier Virtual, and is there any school that accounts for a particularly large percentage of students who are enrolled at the school? So, and this is just for last year as an example. So for 15-16, 17% of the students that were came to the school had never been reported in an Indiana school before, and we believe that it's largely the kindergartners and first graders who would be enrolled in the school. Probably of more interest is no other school in the state other than other state virtual schools contributed to more than 0.5% of the school's enrollment. So if there is a pattern, it appears that other virtual schools are the source of more enrollment by school than traditional publics. So this is just a quick summary of what we found and what we saw and observed in a very good and collegial visit with the school. and I'll just summarize what we see as key challenges, provide a little detail, and then a wrap-up slide. So highly fluid school enrollment, which we talked a little bit about already, the alignment, which has been a key topic of conversation already today, extensive flexibility afforded by the school, resulting in uneven engagement of students. And we felt this was a pretty key element. It's sort of the thing that draws families in, but also potentially represents the most enormous challenge, perhaps beyond alignment, for the school. Sustained leadership and consistency of vision, pending status of the school with regard to renewal of the charter. Obviously, there's some uncertainty weighing on the minds of parents, of the faculty, and things like that. And then just newness of the model of schooling and perhaps the lack of understanding of enrollees regarding family commitment and time. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the coming slides. So we had a chance to visit with some of the families that are here today, and we got the chance to have extended conversations with them in person. They chose this because they thought it was the best educational choice for their student. They cited the flexibility that they had, and you heard that in the stories that were shared. The academic rating of the school is not so much a principal factor in the choice. In fact, some of the parents cited that they were coming to this school from A-rated districts. They do serve every county in Indiana. When we talked to the leadership team and the governance, a few representatives from the board felt that the recent leadership change at the school had been positive. They did comment about the charter authorizer wanting to be careful about not leaning in too much. And the board, we felt, was looking for metrics of success, trying to understand a little bit more about exactly what to look for when measuring the success of the school and how to monitor that on an ongoing basis. We've talked already about the alignment. I don't think I have anything I can share to add to that. And the key role of the parent in providing the instructional program, I think, can't really be overstated, because it was described as sort of a three-legged school, right? The teacher, the parent, and the student all working together. And if that parent is not able to provide, or as the term that's used at the academy is an instructional coach. It may not be a parent, it may be a grandparent, it may be another caregiver. But if that time commitment and that level of support is not there, that creates an enormous challenge on the engagement side. One of the more recent interventions that the school has piloted and brought online in full gear this year is the Family Academic Success Team, which in the notes, that if you've had a chance to look at them, it's called the FAST team. This team has stated that their key goal was to save teachers time and essentially to offload some of the administrative burden of tracking down kids, finding out why they hadn't logged in, finding out why they hadn't participated in 5 sessions. And one of the elements that they're looking at is a sort of algorithmically determined look at all the students, categorizing them into red, yellow, and green. And the red is sort of in danger of not being enrolled in the school in an 8-week time, in the next 8 weeks. Okay, so that's sort of the metric that this team is using to sort of reach out to parents who is the most in danger of not fulfilling what they need to do and learn. A little summary on student performance, again, just kind of encapsulating some of the data that we looked at earlier. And I think the exceptions to the performance patterns are the stories you heard earlier. Forest and the trees, like the data on the Compass site is the forest, right? We heard from individual accounts of success, and we wanted to make sure that those did not go unnoted. students with particular needs, and this is not meant to be exhaustive, but again, serving a population that includes has self-described, normal average students and others with dramatic needs for a different environment. School culture, there are monthly events to make this feel as much like a real, quote unquote, I'm using that term real from Dr. Ernest, it's a term he used. Another phrase they said is we're trying to do these things to help this estate seem small, to connect folks to one another. They have things like science fairs, art competitions, prom, and they also offer support for parents, teaching them how to use the platform, be more successful, things like that. Improvement efforts that have been undertaken include these. I've already mentioned the FAST team. You've heard about additional teacher leadership. We did hear about some adjustments to expectations regarding participation in live lessons at the lower grades. So there has been some experimentation there, but again, we don't know how many students are not actually participating in the live or recorded sessions. I can't tell you a number there, but that's where the key concern would become in, because right now the alignment piece that you were discussing earlier essentially is solved at that layer. So to the extent that students are simply going through the pacing guide and not participating in the live lessons, you can easily see how a disconnect could happen, especially when it comes time for assessment. And then they are undertaking some renewed efforts to onboard families when they enroll. They're talking about doing some additional office hours before and after school to just increase accessibility to teachers. Although we would say that we felt the teachers were working extremely hard and were already, taking on their non-teaching day, spending a lot of time with students as well. But those are some improvements that they're either underway or planned. And then this is my last slide. The professional staff is supportive of the administration's direction. We did note a lack of intervention and support by the authorizer, low performance on math and ELA, low performance in terms of growth. And then annual expenses reported 2016 of $23 million. That's all I have.
I have a number of questions.
Okay, fire away.
I'd just like to start out. First off, for those in the room, know that we appreciate your being here. Many of the decisions that come before this board, there's no easy answers. So we're really trying to get down to the bottom of these issues and do what we think is in the best interest of the kids, the students at the school. So just know that that's kind of the context of how I'm approaching it and how I think the rest of the board is as well. Last fall, we had somewhat of a similar discussion, and at the time, we felt like we needed more data, more information from the department. We were also presented with kind of an on-the-ground assessment at that time, if you'll recall, and the information, if I can summarize, the information that I heard at that time was fairly positive. Things were, plans were in place, things we feel are heading in the right direction, and part of our job here at the state board is to rely on the professional staff of the department and our state board staff and their assessments on the ground, et cetera. So tell me, in your view, has anything changed since last fall? Do you feel like things have gone even further in the positive trend? Do you feel like we're kind of the same? Do you feel like maybe we've fallen back a little bit? What's your assessment?
Yeah, thanks for the question.
You've spent time on the ground in the last couple weeks, so
right.
This is really important.
Our visit occurred on April 28th and May 1st. I was not at the department when the first review occurred, so I can't really speak to any delta between those two visits. I will say that the conversation that we had in the visiting team is that, the on-site visit did not yield any, like, aha moments where we're like, oh, well, that's clearly the reason, this or that particular reason, Staff were, I've mentioned to, that, I have young kids. I would have liked to see my kids with some of those teachers, right? So, I mean, we didn't get to talk to all the teachers, we got to talk with some of them. We saw teaching happening, and teachers were very, very invested and didn't really have any, particular concerns on that. So, if there was an aha moment, it was this sort of, this sense of the mobility churn, and the question of alignment was noted by the staff, but what really weren't able to get to is like how many students are not taking part in the actual instruction. And I think the data might suggest that number is really large, because we're not seeing growth participation. So you can't pass a test you haven't taken, right? And then once you've taken it, if you haven't had the curriculum. So I would say from a visit standpoint, the operations seemed to be sound from what we could see, and enthusiastic staff that said things like, "I wouldn't be here professionally if I thought we were going in the wrong direction." They were not a verbatim quote, but an approximation. So yeah, I don't know if that helps to answer your question at all, but we had a very, very positive interaction. We met with 10 families and heard from each one what was going on, and some of those stories were similar to what you heard this morning as well.
So clearly the school is working very well for a certain segment of the population that are enrolled at the school. That's clear by the people who are here today, by a lot of the success stories, and what we're really trying to dig into are where we feel like they're falling behind, kids aren't getting the instruction they need, they're not engaged, et cetera. So that's really what we're focused on here. And I read your report, and the things that kind of stood out to me were, number one, there were a lot of kids that just weren't engaged. And the school was allocating a substantial amount of resources to trying to get them engaged. So I don't know, to me, I know it's an open enrollment, but it seems to me there should be some orientation type issues or programming built into admitting kids so that you maybe make sure that it's the right fit for them, like it is so many others. But it seems like there's a lot of people who are getting admitted and they're just not successful for one reason or another, and they're not engaged. The school is doing appears to be doing everything they can to get them engaged to do their job, but there's just ships crossing in the middle of the night. And to that point, I did the back of the napkin calculation. I was about $25 million, but the state of Indiana is spending almost $24 million annually on the school. And there are a number of students who are in great families are choosing the school and it works for them, but there's a whole heck of a lot of students where it's not working. And the state is spending a ton of money on failure. So that is a big concern. Not just the failure part, but we're also spending money and not getting any results. I recognize the challenges of the school that are highlighted in the report as well. The mobility rates are high, but we also see those concerns at other urban school, public schools, similar concerns. I'm also concerned about the overall student performance, which we've seen kind of similar to the state average, has also declined, but we're not seeing the growth that we would hope for. Obviously, we've talked about graduation rates and turnover rates, also very concerning. So I guess I agree with my colleagues that I feel like there needs to be a much higher sense of urgency. And I would remind folks that over 2 years ago, I was the sole vote on this board against, no sanctions moving forward with the school. And I felt like at the time that we needed to make sure that there were consequences for what I felt were some shortcomings. And so I'm kind of in the same boat today. I mean, I don't think I've changed my mind. Here we are 2 years later, and we're talking about plans and what can we do. I guess I would also disagree a little bit respectfully with my colleague, Dr. Freitas, that I feel like it is on Ball State, but it's also on K-12. They are running the school, and so I think it's on them to ensure that there's performance and that there's not as many shortcomings as there have clearly been. So I have concerns about all parties that are here, but I guess my question is maybe just digress from those points. Are there other virtual school options for the students at the school?
I think the virtual charters in Indiana were on the list of sending schools to Hoosier Virtual. So if, I have to go back a little ways, but Connections Academy, actually another school on the list was part of the Hoosier network. But the short answer is there are other options. There's a list of what I presume to be a pretty complete list of the virtual options here, although I do believe that one of those schools may have closed, so there's not a lot.
And I believe there's an addition, maybe Wayne Township schools now.
Some outliers, a lot of traditional public schools are now doing, a hybrid of traditional courses, online courses, and then a hybrid of that model. And anybody can enroll in, like I know Wayne is open, Central Indiana Service Center has students who are 100% online. There we're very blessed in Indiana that we have quite a few online options for all levels and a lot of different courses. So there's a lot out there, per se. Yeah. It's expanding as we speak. I mean, it's not exhaustive.
Right.
Yeah.
So there are probably more options for secondary students, I would just add to that, than there are for K-8.
Right. I may have a few additional questions as others come up, but so I'll just reserve my questions.
Any other questions for Dr. Keller? Dr. Keller, you and your team, I know, again, state board staff members who were here, and then our folks from the department, we appreciate your work on this. I know it's a sensitive matter, and I think it was a very positive, and it gave us a lot of information to think about. So thank you for your work on that. Thanks to everybody who served on that team. Any other questions, Dr. Freitas?
I think we're starting to reach a conclusion, hopefully,
I think so.
And did not know if there's a recommendation from the department or whether you're looking for a motion from the body.
We just need a motion from this board, and then we will go from there. Dr. Yeager?
Would somebody summarize the 3 bullet points?
Would the state board staff please do that? It's on the memo. All of you have that in your binder after the new business action, but do you want to summarize the 3 options that we have?
Superintendent, while we're waiting for someone to come up, before we have a motion, I think it would maybe help if we went around the table and just kind of said where we thought we were. That's a suggestion to my fellow board members before there's any kind of formal.
I think obviously we're not formally voting, but I think if you want to have comments, anybody can comment at this point before we make a motion. If we want to do that, that's fine. If you choose not to as a board member, that's your...
Yep.
Before you do that, I want to ask...
You want to know the 3 points?
No. I want to know the 3 points, yes. I want to ask legal counsel if that's legal for us to go around and express where we are
Last comments?
regarding this issue.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure that's legal. I want to make sure it is.
I think it's more of a discussion.
Yeah.
What concerns you may have as opposed to how you're going to vote. I agree with you completely as to laying out.
Yeah,
Be careful.
yeah, Dr. Deere is right. Being careful is always good advice, but I think in the context here, it's discussion regarding an upcoming motion.
So the last 3 bullets, can you go over those real quick, or the 3 bullets?
Yeah. So pursuant to Indiana Code 2024 2.2-3, the board is provided with 3 options in addition to just not taking any action. The action items are transfer the charter school to a different authorizer, order the charter school to close at the end of the school year, or reduce the administrative fees collected by the authorizer, which of course in this situation would be Ball State. Currently, Ball State receives the max 3% in administrative fees.
So close it all together, reduce Ball State's fee, and keep Ball State on it as the authorizer.
That included with the reduction of fee is the possibility of limiting enrollment.
Limited enrollment, yes. And then transfer to another authorizer. If we transfer to another authorizer, does, once again, does the timeline start over?
Well, if it were transferred to a new authorizer, the school were transferred to a new authorizer, presumably that would result in the creation of a new charter with that authorizer, and that new charter would be subject to the minimum state requirements, which is the 4 years of Fs.
So the answer is yes.
I believe so, yes.
Even with the same students?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
An authorizer.
Yeah.
And we
Well,
don't
yes,
have
of
that.
course. Yeah, we would have to have an authorizer who would be willing to take on the school and the charter.
Have you pursued other authorizers in a formal way since the fall?
In a formal way, no.
So we don't know whether there's another authorizer out there, is that correct?
Yeah. If the board were to pursue that option, I think the next step would be to engage in that information collection process.
Eligible authorizers are identified in statute, correct?
Yes, as well as there are a number of methods for other entities to request to become an authorizer, but there are a set number of authorizers that are authorizers by law.
Do you recall what those are off the top of your head? I don't.
Public university, four-year universities are the majority of the ones listed in the statute.
Wasn't Indianapolis Mayor or something?
Mayor's office, I believe. Can you think of any other ones off the top of your head? What, charter
Public
school board?
school, I mean, you've got, different models.
Don't bother, I just...
Yeah, the charter school board would be another one. Okay.
So understanding the sensitivity and the seriousness of our vote, is there a motion regarding Hoosier Virtual Academies?
I'd like to make my opinion known before any motion, but someone wants to make a motion.
If you, by all means.
I guess where I am is, we have the option of option 1 or option 3 or doing nothing. I think doing nothing is absolutely not an option. I have a concern about transferring to a different authorizer for a lot of reasons. I also have a concern about closing the school. I don't think that serves the best interests of the students, even though I have a lot of concerns about the operation of the school. I guess from my vantage point, I would say my position would be that I would like to see the school, I would be in favor of the school operating in the next school year, but I would advocate for undertaking option 2. And then I will also say essentially, this is a fire drill, maybe not fire drill, fire alarm. And we want to see K-12 and Ball State come together and bring their A game to address some of these issues. You know, I think the incoming enrollment issues, the expulsions issues, the lack of growth, all those that we kind of went through are just very, very troubling. And again, acknowledging that the school serves a portion of its enrolled students, you know, in a very, very strong way. But I feel like there should be some steps taken by this board to recognize the shortcomings. And so I would advocate that, you know, for the next school year, and then we would be looking very closely maybe a year from now as to see what the performance looks like. But I would go with option 2, and I would redirect the administrative fee that is currently going to Ball State back into the school. I think we would need to discuss how that gets allocated. But I'd also, you know, I heard the number $500,000 from K-12. I would also be looking for them to bring additional resources to the table over the course of the next, you know, few months to ensure, you know, the plan, and I think they need to continue working with the Department of Ed and State Board staff to refine that based on what you've heard today.
So Gordon, through your conversation, I'm hearing a motion for option 2. Is that fair? I think we have to be careful.
No, I'm not making a motion. I'm just saying that's kind of where I am, and I'm willing to make a motion or have someone else make a motion.
Okay, so what would you, who would like to make the motion?
Or BJ or I will.
So BJ, you make your motion, please.
My motion would be that Ball State retains 1% of their fee, 2% goes back into the plan for implementation, and that we freeze enrollment effective October 1st.
You freeze it by prohibiting them from accepting new students?
Accepting new students.
Is there a second to that motion? So you're saying 1% to the authorizer,
The authorizer,
and
2%.
no more, and you're withholding accepting new students for enrollment?
And 2% goes back into school for plan implementation.
Can I ask why 1% and 2%?
Well, hang on, we'll get to discussion. Is there a second? Now discussion.
Can I ask?
Because honestly, I don't feel like shotgun weddings work. This needs to be a co-effort, and I think with some skin in the game, and nobody's saying that Ball State would walk from it because it's based on dollars, but their time is worth something. Obviously, we've made our point, but I feel like it's fair. I feel like they've recognized some of the mistakes that have been made, and I think working together would be the best way to correct it.
So there's a motion, there's a second, any more discussion?
BJ, would your motion, could I have the motion repeated?
So,
Options.
motion to
Speak up, please.
cut the admin fee at Ball State College for virtual from 3% down to 1%.
Okay.
And freeze enrollment effective October 1st.
Is that?
I'm with you now.
The redirect part.
We'll just remain there. Just rewrite, would be a part of it, the two-thirds would just remain.
Dr. Frey?
BJ, your motion has two components. One is the administrative fee, and the other is the limited enrollment. And from a procedural perspective, I'd like to divide the motion into two separate motions, because I can support one of those but not the other. And so procedurally, that's typically done when there's two components. Would that be acceptable?
I will withdraw my motion.
We can divide it.
A new one, though.
And do the administrative fee first, maybe, and then do the limited enrollment second. That's two separate motions, okay.
Dr. Yeager, did you have a comment?
Yeah, it's not really a question, it's just a comment, and it's unfortunate, this group of people, because I think the audience and the people watching can see how passionate we are about what's best for girls and boys. We have different opinions, we have a lot of the same opinions, but sometimes different opinions, and it's unfortunate we're here at this stage where we are. I certainly understand the emotion and the passion, and I appreciate the traveling that the parents have put in to get here and to get to previous meetings. What I struggle with is the logic of these kids and these parents are getting cheated by the education they're receiving. So that's what kind of grinds my clock a little bit. It's unfortunate. We have to look at the emotional part. We also, as a board, we have to look at the logical part and figure out in the end what parts of those two entities get to what's best for girls and boys.
So any other comments before we vote?
And I'm not sure where I am with all
We
this
will
yet.
take a
I gotta
vote. So
make my
can
mind
you
up
read the motion one
in a
more
few
time,
minutes.
please?
So separate out, I believe the first motion would be to cut the admin fee from 3% to 1%.
Brian, I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
So the first part of the motion then.
Can you step up to the mic, Brian? Sorry. Just for the folks at home.
So breaking the motion into two motions, the first is to cut the administrative fee from 3% to 1%. And that money would be redirected towards implementation of the improvement.
That's 1% of the 450. No, 1% of the
1%.
3%.
1% of 3%.
Yeah, 30%.
It's one-third of it.
One-third.
One-third and two-thirds if that's cleaner.
Thank you, that helps me.
Okay, sorry.
That's what called me originally.
Roll call, please.
Dr. Freitas?
Yes.
Mr. Hendry?
Yes.
Dr. McMahon?
Yes.
Mr. Watts?
Yes.
Mrs. Wicker?
Yes.
Dr. Yeager?
Yes.
Superintendent McCormick?
No.
Motion carries. And then would the second part of the motion be the enrollment freeze, October 1st?
So now, we're not freezing enrollment until October 1st?
That was the motion.
Okay. Why October 1st? Can we discuss now again this motion?
Yeah, so do we have a second for that part of the motion, that we're freezing enrollment as of October 1st?
The date was arbitrary, I mean, I was saying.
Do you want to change that date?
You would
Can we
change it
change the date?
to May 10th?
Yes.
That'd be the preference,
yes.
yeah, absolutely. But my date was
Second.
freezing. Okay.
Effective immediately.
Effective
Second.
immediately, absolutely.
So are we all clear on that?
You get that, Brian?
You want question? Yep.
I'm going to speak out against limiting enrollment, and for me, the issue is not to penalize kids and parents. So there are kids and parents throughout the state of Indiana who want to be part of this school, and it's a parental choice issue. And I think we need to be really careful that we don't penalize parents and students. And you know, my gripe is with the authorizer, and we just took action to mete out some consequences for them. But I say when you're limiting enrollment, you're telling parents across the state of Indiana, you no longer have that option. And I really think that's unfair to students and parents. Now, if the concern is if they take in more students, they'll get more money, the motion could be amended in a friendly kind of way that any new students they take in, they will not get the necessary fee with that.
And I guess I want to, can I say why? I want to follow up with, I believe in school choice, and I want to give parents the choice, but what I want to do is give them the opportunity to get this under control. Because in my opinion, part of what they've argued is they've had so many students in and out. We have so many students that are, it goes up and down, and every 2 weeks we've got 300 students in and out. It's so hard to control the population. We have students when we have consistency, we have consistent numbers. Okay, get it under control, get your data under control, show us you have the capability to do it, and then we can give you back the opportunity to enroll students again. Because if you can't get it under control, the next option is to close you, and then no one has any choice.
My comment to that is if you're a parent in South Bend, Indiana, and you have a child or two that wants to enroll in this, who suffers?
And I understand that, but in the end, there won't be any choice for them.
They suffer. And so again, I think we can make the same point by not penalizing parents and students. I can't go to a parent that calls me up and says, well, you have to wait a year because they're still getting their act together, to use your concepts. I really think it's unfair to ask any parent to wait a year to have their student enrolled in the school. Is there work to do? Absolutely. There's a lot of work to do. But is the consequence going to be meted out against the parent who wants to join the school this next year? No, I think that's unfair.
Any other questions before we vote on?
If I could respond, the reason I wanted the date next year, to your point, is siblings. I may have a fifth grader who's virtual and a 5-year-old who will be coming into school that I can't enroll next year. So that was why I would prefer the date. Obviously, if it's a deal breaker, I'll support whatever the board wants to do. But that's why I would prefer a date that is after the start of school in 2017, after August of 2017.
I would rather, that creates a loophole that you can drive a truck through. What I would do is, I would limit just siblings. And then you're dealing with your problem in the most narrow way, if that's a concern.
I agree. And if I could, I was where David was a week ago. And honestly, I tossed back and forth this completely, and I asked the question, lots of people, what, if we limit this, I don't understand the benefit, and it is, to Carrie's point, get your hands around it and do it. But the sibling thing I would like to have included, I don't know how to do that, Madam Chair.
Friendly amendment. But I would like to just stop the bleeding. I mean, that's, first off, that's what we got to do.
So before we make the amendment change, my piece of discussion is just so the families know where I am at and those who are watching. I believe in choice. I believe in quality choice. I also believe in quality authorizers. And as I'm talking across the nation to folks, the big push right now is quality authorizers, holding them responsible, making sure that is of quality. My last vote reflected, I am not confident Ball State is that authorizer at this point. I'm not sure why we're giving them 1%. The other piece of that is you rely on the State Board of Education and your state superintendent to ensure that you're going into a quality environment for your child in education. And so when we take a vote, we're ensuring that your child is getting the state standards that's the law, and that you're getting evaluated fairly. And so for my point is the quality of the authorizer and the quality of the choice. It's not just about choice. It should be about quality of choice. And until that conversation changes in Indiana, we're going to be sitting at this table making these decisions time and time again. So holding that authorizer available or responsible and making sure this is a quality choice, not just a choice, quality choice. So having said that, how would you like to amend your motion?
My motion would be to freeze enrollments effective immediately, excluding siblings of current students.
That are currently enrolled.
Of current students, yes.
And give them until the count date, because nobody knows.
Don't have to,
Okay.
if it's a sibling, it goes.
Okay.
Brian, is that?
And then work.
Clear as mud?
Okay. Does he need a second?
He needs a second. Any other discussion? Again, I think for this board, a reminder about quality choice versus just choice. With that, roll call, please.
Dr. Prince?
No.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Dr. McMahon?
Yes.
Mr. Watts?
Yes.
Mrs. Wicker?
Yes.
Dr. Yeager?
No.
Superintendent McCormick?
No.
Motion fails.
Did the motion pass?
Did not.
Did not, okay.
Okay, do we need to go? So enrollment's not frozen?
We need to go.
Is there, I
Is there
guess,
another motion?
Another motion.
discussion, is there, does any one of the no votes want to make a?
Sure, I will say why. I think if we're saying it's such a situation that we are stopping enrollment to put any child in there regardless of relationship to the children in attendance, I just find that to be of concern. So if we're saying we have such concerns, it's not even aligned to the state standards, those are very baseline. There are no tools being driven to say what are the concerns and how are we going to address them. things that are, the flexibility that's been afforded that we have found have not been successful. We're putting more and more children into that environment, knowing, I hope it improves, I hope they get their act together and it becomes a great environment, not just for a small pocket of children, but for every student who is enrolled in that environment. Because we can't just worry about 19% of the students in that environment. So my concern was just that, again, if we're concerned about the quality and we're allowing more children to filter into that environment, knowing there are grave concerns, and this isn't the first year, this is the 5th year, so we've had time to get it together, that's my concern. So if the motion changes that we are freezing enrollment as of today, I can get behind that. That's my concern. If we freeze it without the caveat of you can just keep taking siblings, and that's a different discussion for me. I mean, if parents are choosing to be knowing everything that's going on and understanding the situation and they choose to stay because it works for their child, there are other online options for other students who want to go that route down the road that I think Indiana has done a nice job providing that under other authorizers, under different districts. I mean, there are other choices that are quality choices that have been proven that. So that's just my concern, to say it's okay for your brother or sister to go into that through all the discussion we just had with all of our concerns.
If I could.
Correct.
But the parent of a child in that school would be saying, I'm here, I'm living this every day, and I still want to send my younger child to that school. I don't see where it's any of our place to tell that parent, no, you can't do that. That's my thought. I don't think it's anyone's business but that student and that parents.
I do, because the students are getting shortchanged, period. They're getting shortchanged. I would make the motion that enrollment be limited to students who are enrolled today for 1 year. That makes sense?
That's the same motion that we
Yes.
just voted on.
Without siblings.
Without siblings, no siblings.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Dr. Freitas.
No.
Mr. Henry.
Yes.
Dr. McMahon.
Yes.
Mr. Waltz.
No.
Mrs. Wicker.
Yes.
Dr. Yeager.
Yes.
Mr. Lieutenant McCormick.
Yes.
Motion fails for lack of 6.
Motion failed, did you say?
We have to have 6.
I forgot by almost. Okay, let's do something.
Can we move on, or?
No, I mean, we can,
I have a further comment. I mean, my comment is, okay, the motion failed. We have 1 recused board member. We have 2 vacancies on the board. We can take this up again, and I will be pursuing that at a subsequent board meeting. It's not over today. And I'd also say that, you know, as it relates to my position on the school, you know, despite the people that it works really well for, and there are a lot of them, and they're here in the room today, there are fundamental issues with the school, and I have some real concerns. So I will just make the statement that a year from now, if there isn't dramatic change, then I'm going to have a pretty different position as it relates to the school.
so having concern that there will be no freeze of any sort is very, and it's going to remain open, is very concerning to me. So in light of it staying open, and it'll be a free-for-all again, is not acceptable for me. So if we can change an amendment to say we can freeze enrollment as of today, including no re-enrollments, and if we have the provision of the sibling, just change the no re-enrollments to make sure we have some type of freeze on the enrollment. Do you want me to repeat that? So we're freezing enrollment as of today, including no re-enrollments, however, letting the provision of the sibling for a year.
What do you mean by re-enrollment?
So if you dropped out in October of this
You
year.
were on last year, you can't come
That's
back.
correct.
So former students are not allowed to re-enroll.
Correct.
Isn't that the same vote we took initially, Brian?
We're
Really
just changing
taking that-
wording to put in no re-enrollments.
I can support that.
It's a second?
Second.
We've already taken the vote, right, Brian?
Discussion?
We can call it back for revote if you want.
My reason to bring it up with a change in it is my big concern is we're leaving this table, leaving it open for a free-for-all for enrollment, and that is not what's best for kids. Roll call, please.
Dr. Branch?
No.
Mr. Hess?
Yes.
Dr. McMahon?
Yes.
Mr. Watts?
Yes.
Mrs. Whitaker?
Yes.
Dr. Yeager?
Yes.
Superintendent McCormick?
Yes.
We have one.
Thank you. We are going to take a break at this...
Question?
I'm sorry, yes.
Okay, we passed these two motions, and this is for 1 year from today, 1 year to the end of the school year. When do we get reapproached by this group? Not the parents, but the provider.
Right. How does that legally work, Brian? That's a legal question.
So, I'll say we'll be back before this board after the school year, but less than a calendar year,
to ask for permission to seek approval of the charter, so that'll give sufficient time to review improvement.
school year 17, 18.
Yes, correct. When does the charter?
The charter ends June 30th of 2018.
So we'll be back then. Or soon.
We'll be doing the renewal.
Gotcha. Okay.
So before we take a break, Bob, while you're still here, obviously, I'm a big supporter of Ball State University, graduate of Ball State, but I hope this state board is not put in this situation again. This should have been dealt with without board action, in my opinion, from an authorizer's point of view. So for whatever, I know you're working on things and you're trying to get some things solved, but I think it's a shame we're in this situation.
I heard all the comments very loud and clear.
Thank you.
We will take action.
Thank you.
Thank you.